Grüß, willkommen in einem aufregendes video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 14 of my Star Trek The Original Series Timeline Analysis series of videos. In this video, I'll discuss the drive of a civilization to expand outwards. One of the interesting points about Star Trek The Original Series is how some races expand and some seem to just stay on their own planet. While we have many examples of races who go out to create empires, especially in the past, when you look at a fan map of Star Trek universe, you'll be struck at how the map is dominated by the Federation, Klingons, Romulans, and later by the Cardassians. Putting the Cardassians aside, as they do not exist yet in the original series, we have four races which have gone out to create multi-system political empires. In the original series, the Federation is overwhelmingly dominated by humans, and in almost every example, only humans are involved in colonization. There are some minor exceptions, mainly races fleeing their destroyed home planet, but in the Federation, all the new colonies seem to be human. There must be other alien colonies out there, but if there are, they are few and far between, and the Enterprise certainly doesn't visit them in the series. As a result, you can say the Federation is a human empire of sort, in the same way the Klingons and Romulans have their own empire, although I have to admit there is a major difference between the human and Klingon-Romulan empires. We can say the humans, Romulans and Klingons have something special about them which allow them to expand into space to create a multi-system empire. Why is this the case? Of course, we know the answer to this question for the series. Makeup is expensive and producers need to make most people human with only a few aliens. However, while the animated series does not have this particular financial restrictions, there are still a lot of humans wandering around even in the animated series. The other reason is if the galaxy is filled with alien races, the TV show will simply end up being focused on endless conflicts between different races in space, which the viewers will find it very difficult to keep track of. There may be other reasons, but putting that to one side, let's assume the original series scripts accurately describe the reality of Star Trek space. In this case, how can we explain the lack of drive for most races to go out and expand into space? First of all, I'm not considering civilization which were destroyed or are collapsing or declining, as we saw in the episode Man Trap. I'll also not be covering civilizations which disappeared, even if they left something behind, such as robots or androids, as in the episode What a Little Girl's Made Of. On a side note, I always wondered who the female android was modelled on, perhaps the mad scientist fantasy woman. I'll also have to ignore races which are on the path to transcend into a non-corporeal state, as we see in the episode The Gamesters of Triskelion. Because of this transition to a non-corporeal form, they all seem to retreat to a single planet. But in the path, most certainly, they possibly did expand into space before getting bored with the whole thing. Maybe not the case for the aliens in the episode Gamester and Triskelion, but there are many other examples. I'll also group the Telosians into this bucket as well. I'll also ignore the two civilizations from the Andromeda Galaxy. I have enough trouble keeping track of the Milky Way without worrying about other galaxies. So let's go through our races. First, let's deal with the simplest civilization type. Those who simply lack the technology to light even an electric light bulb, much less build a spacecraft. I suspect this rather handsome specimen from the planet Rigel 7 lacks the technology to start colonizing other planets, which is probably very fortunate for the other planets. The inhabitants of Capella 4 are similar. No spacecraft here, but lots of big husky men. The inhabitants of Gamma Trigulia 6 don't even know where babies come from, much less being capable of building spacecraft. While very smart and eventually they would achieve space travel, the people of the Roman world have no spacecraft yet, again probably quite fortunate for other planets. The inhabitants of the Paradise planet, which I call Apella, have no spacecraft as well, although they are getting guns, so maybe eventually they would be able to get spacecraft, perhaps. The inhabitants of the Gangster planet from the episode A Piece of the Action are very smart, but not smart enough to build spacecraft yet. The inhabitants of Omega 4 have lots of furs and semi-naked inhabitants, but no rocket craft. Let's now look at Earth-like planets discovered which have a primitive race on it, similar to the American Indians in the episode The Paradise Syndrome. There is an alien object on the planet of high technology, so there must be another civilization somewhere with spacecraft, but certainly not this civilization. Gem is an empath from a planet threatened with destruction due to a nova. As a nova was going to destroy her civilization, her planet cannot have interstellar spacecraft, but you never know, they may have interplanetary capability. I suspect, based on her clothing, the green-skinned people of Orion also lack the technology to create a greater Orion empire. But the people of Orion may have space capability, especially if the Orion planets, or pirates, are from the same place. On the other hand, the Earth colonized at least one planet in the same system, which seems to imply they may have lacked space capability, or only gained it recently, perhaps even from the people from Earth. We also see there are a number of civilizations with interplanetary capability, but no interstellar capability. The people of Xeon and Icos are good examples. They have interplanetary capacity, but no interstellar ability. I suspect it's good the pseudo-Nazis have not expanded to other systems. MNR7 was able to colonize Vendikar in 1564 Earth time, but never took the next step to leave their own system. They ended up in a massive war, but before that they had 200 years to develop interstellar technology and leave their system, but they did not. Perhaps the nearest star was far away, or perhaps they never thought it was possible, so never tried. They simply lacked the drive. The Elas from the episode Elan of Troyes have only just developed interplanetary flight, so they may have the drive but no opportunity to execute on it yet. The other alien race in the episode Elan of Troyes, the Troyes, have only just developed interstellar spacecraft, which is the same situation as Elas. I think by now we've identified a host of alien races which simply lack the technology to expand out into the galaxy. But some races seem to have all the necessary ingredients and fall flat for some reason. The people of Beta 3 had a reasonably high level of civilization in 3736 BC, Earth time, but because of war they declined and became static. They may have had space flight before they declined, but this clearly went nowhere. The first Federation in the episode Corbomite Maneuver was very advanced and possessed interstellar spacecraft, yet why did they not expand out and colonize more planets? While we only have a home planet or a single planet, perhaps they do have some other colonies around. On the other hand, and based on what Baylight ended up looking like, perhaps they are beginning the journey to a non-corporeal state and are actually retreating back to a single planet. This race is a bit of a puzzle, I must admit. The Gorn are advanced and have space flight, as well as claiming other planets. This race is simply a slow expander, or may have started their outward push far after or much later than Earth, Klingons and the Romulans. In the episode The Tholian Web, we get another alien race, in this case the Tholian Assembly. This race has a multi-planet nation or empire or association, but like the Gorn may have just started late in the game or are slow expanders. On the other hand, because of the unusual environment they live in, perhaps they have an extensive empire. It's just that there's no crossover with, let's say, the Federation, although I doubt this because they seem to claim specific areas of space, so there must be a solid border between the Tholian Assembly and everyone else. Let's now look at our favourite planet, Earth. After a long and bloody series of war, Earth was exhausted and traumatised and, almost by accidents, launched an interstellar craft which resulted in first contact, almost certainly. This gave Earth the drive to expand out. The discovery of alien races, especially aliens with FTL drive, and the fear of being invaded was their key driver. In simple terms, the people of Earth were paranoid, which is why they went all out expanding. In this timeline, the Earth had a greater focus on interplanetary travel, even before any wars and aliens came on the scene. This is probably due to a space race occurring because of a vicious Cold War. This could also be a driver, but after the Cold War ended, the driver went away. So why did this continue to be a cause? It was then quickly replaced by a fear of aliens, which is really the main driver for Earth getting out there. When we look at the Romulans, they seemed a little bit similar to Earth. Their home, Vulcan, was racked by war, which resulted in the Romulans leaving and founding their own civilization. They were driven into space by war, which did have some parallels with Earth, but not exactly the same. They weren't paranoid about other aliens. They just wanted their own bit of territory to create the civilization they wanted to create on it. As for the Vulcans, they solved their problems by adopting a logical philosophy, but I also suspect the Romulans leaving may have resulted in their most adventurous and troublesome inhabitants leaving as well. Saying that, they did develop FTL drive and did keep an eye out on other civilizations close by, as well as engaging in trade. As for the Klingons, this is a bit of a mystery to me. If my theory of Carlos the Unforgettable is correct, he was involved in significant amounts of warfare which unified his race. Coupled with this was the Klingon planet may have been poor, so expansion was necessary for survival. This is a wild guess, but it could explain why they did what they did. The Vians are another puzzling race. They have the technology created or needed to create an empire and wish to remain hidden and are probably only on one planet. I suspect this race, after a terrible war, are more focused on security than expansion. They may have experienced too much trauma in the past and were never contacted by other alien races, so could remain hidden. So they went down a different path for their own personal security. Expanding into space may require some significant trauma to occur to allow a race to make the sacrifice to go out and expand. I'm uncertain if this is correct or not, but let's look at the races which puzzle me the most. Those races which ended up in the Federation as full member spacefaring races. Let's look at the Andorians. Why is there no Andorian Empire? They joined the Federation along with a host of other aliens, but why did this race not go out and create their own multi-system nation? One explanation is a lack of trauma and perhaps lack of technology. The same likely applies with the Tellarites. They are a full member of the Federation. I expect they have space travel before they joined as well. The unseen, at least in the original series, Rigelians are probably in the same bucket. The Orgalians are an interesting race. They seem reasonably primitive, but must have interplanetary spaceflight to be in the Federation. I suspect they totally lack the drive to expand and are focused purely on hedonistic pursuits. I have no problems with that, I can assure you. Rigel 4, also in the Federation, must have spaceflight, but have not expanded. Again, I have no idea in this case why that's their position. Perhaps they got space travel very late, perhaps they had no incentive, who knows. Ardana, another Federation member planet, almost certainly alien, even if the inhabitants are rather humanoid, have a high level of technology, but once again, no multi-planet nation state. Gideon is another alien planet, which is not part of the Federation in this case, but probably within Federation space. They seem to have the technology to create spacecraft, but have not. As they were so overpopulated, I'm uncertain why they did not expand. But even in Star Trek, it's hard to move billions of people around the galaxy, so they may not have seen this as a solution to their overpopulation problems. This point is a key point I will come back to, because I think this is the clue that explains why some races never bothered to expand. The Halicans seem to have space flight of a sort, but once again have not expanded. They are a pacifist race, which is not part of the Federation. Clearly no expansionist drive in this particular case. So let's look at all these examples to come up with some sort of conclusions. Civilizations which are too primitive and lack the technology can easily be excluded, as they never possess the capability or opportunity. But civilizations with technology who did not expand are more difficult to explain, especially if they exist in great numbers. But perhaps they do not exist in great numbers. If only 4 to 6 civilizations did expand when they possessed the technology, we can possibly expect a similar number of civilizations to lack that incentive to expand into space. Simple probability. But in this case, that is not the case. There's a lot more of these guys. The real issue is there is a reasonably large number of civilizations in the Federation which never expanded when they could have done so. One theory I have is the Vulcans, for example, instead of expanding their population out into space, decided to expand their economic and political influence instead. They met the Andorians, Tellarites, and others when those civilizations first developed the technology to leave their planets or systems. As a result, the Vulcans did expand, but it was a trade association expansion, not colonies or conquest. Once the Vulcans contacted other races, they unified and began to trade and establish political contacts through the Vulcans, who seemed benevolent and who possessed superior spacefaring technology. When the Vulcans first made contact with Earth, they probably expected a similar result. But after engaging in global war for decades, the Terrans were not in the mood to simply trust and rely on the Vulcans. They wanted to ensure their own safety and security, and as a result expanded. This was also certainly fortunate for the Vulcans and their loose network of trading allies. When the Romulans arrived, they represented a military threat only the paranoid Terrans could counter, which they did in spades. It was this proof of military power and the threat of the Romulans which most likely made the Vulcans realize they were better if they were in an alliance with this new and powerful, if paranoid, civilization from Earth. If this theory is correct, then the reason why the Andorians and Tellarites never expanded outwards was they never had the need to do so, especially since they could now trade technology with a host of other civilizations using the Vulcans as intermediaries. I expect they would have eventually expanded into space, but by then all the best planets had been taken by the Terrans, and that chance had been lost forever. On the other hand, as members of the Federation, they become part of a much larger community, and by the looks of it, I don't think Terrans had any particular problems with other alien races coming to settle on their planets. The other thought is that colonies don't really benefit the home planet. It's not possible to ship enough people off planet to reduce the population of the home planet, and any colony founded needed an enormous amount of support for a long time before they could contribute economically. It's estimated it takes 100 years, based on the scripts of the Star Trek, the original series. The Andorians and Tellarites simply saw no economic or population or they saw no point in doing so. In their paranoid fear and desire for security, the Terrans created a unique political structure in the galaxy, at least compared with the Klingons and Romulans, which was another model that Terra could have followed. This political structure benefited all those races which were technologically behind or lacked the drive to expand as aggressively as the Romulans or Klingons. This structure also satisfied the Terrans' paranoid fear. This was the Federation. As for the Romulans and Klingons, if my guess is correct, they were in a poorer and a lower density part of the galactic arm, with a massive void towards the galactic centre. They may be aggressive simply because the part of the galaxy that alien race that they lived in were far more competitive due to lack of resources, sort of like the Vikings in Norway. They may have suffered several wars with other equally aggressive neighbours and learned that might may not be right, but it certainly guaranteed survival. This was similar with Earth, except they likely fought other races more than fighting themselves. This brings up an important point. The Klingons and Romulans most likely expanded by conquering alien planets. They did not found colonies, maybe they did some, but not that many, as this did not really provide any immediate benefit for at least a century. The Terrans may well have gone down this path as well, but they had the mysterious Vulcans looking over their shoulder and took the colony planet path instead. It was a long-term solution, but a paranoid and traumatized civilization may well have not worried about the short-term costs as long as there was long-term benefits in terms of security. There is a lot of speculation in this video, and a lot of my assumptions may be totally wrong, but this highly speculative and loose theory does seem to fit the facts as we know it. Perhaps someone will create a better theory in the future, which fits the facts in a much superior manner. But until this occurs, I suspect my theory is about as good as you'll get at this point in time. And so we come to an end of episode 14 of my Star Trek, the original series timeline analysis video series, in this case covering the drive to expand, which some civilizations possess and some do not seem to have. The episode scripts can be found using the URL shown. Alle guten Dingen kommen zu einem Ende.